Good evening and welcome. We are so excited to begin our journey, which we can learn practical, hands-on lessons which can guide us in our day-to-day life. Tonight's class is dedicated in honor of Deb Reiches's father, whose yahrzeit is tonight, Moshe Mendel, the son of Reuven. His neshama, his soul, should have an aliyah, should have an ascent in the heavens above. The world in which we live has drastically changed. For the 7.5 billion people who live in this world, everything has come to a screeching halt. We have an invisible enemy called the coronavirus. And this has plagued humanity. The world we know is no longer the same. I believe and I know that the answer to what we're going through now, the uncertainty that rocks our planet, our universe, has its answer in the message of Pesach, of Passover, this Wednesday night. Pesach has the answer and has the solution to how we should proceed. You see, when you come home Wednesday night to the Seder, it is one of the greatest rituals that American Jewry observe. You have sparkling crystal, you have gleaming silverware, everything is ever so perfect. And as you come home and people are so excited to begin the narrative of the Jewish people's historic and epic salvation, as we began as a slave, as slaves to Pharaoh, with the backbreaking work of building those pyramids, of being in Egyptian bondage, of the cracking whip on our backs. And we speak about how we became free. And everything is so perfect at the Seder. Everything is so beautiful. Our homes have been transformed into royal palaces. And what's one of the first things we do in the Seder? We take a shmora matzah, we take an unleavened bread, and we break it in half. Why? Everything's so perfect. Everything's so beautiful. Why would we break? You know, Judaism, we're not into breaking. We're into fixing. Why would we break a matzah in half? Why? And there are many explanations. We understand that although everything is so perfect and everything is so beautiful, we're only a half. We are incomplete when we are not bonded together with our fellow Jews. That's one explanation. Another explanation is when we're broken, when we make room for God, for a higher authority, when we realize that no matter how perfect and how wonderful our lives are, but we're not on cruise control, we're not doing this by ourselves, we exist, we survive because there is a higher power that breathes life and, for that matter, meaning into our every experience. When we understand that it's not just us, it's not just our brilliance, it's not our understanding, our intellect that propelled us to success. There's something beyond us. There's something greater. And that's how, in the year 2020, when you think about it for a second, when life has never been more uncertain. And as we said, 7.5 billion people in this world have ceased, have stopped, have changed their lifestyle. The stock market has plummeted. Thousands upon thousands of jobs have painfully been lost. Financial institutions, which were the bedrock of a flourishing economy, painfully they have toppled. And what do we do? How do we go on? What are we to say? Comes along the Seder, Wednesday night, and we begin by breaking the matzah, by crying out to God, and by saying, Hashem, have Rahmanas, have mercy. We are broken. We are your people. We believe in you. We can't do it by ourselves. But just like our ancient fathers, just like they were able to dig deep within the recesses of their hearts, just like they were able to overcome the uncertainty of taking over 2 million people, men, women, and children, into a scorching, unknown desert. Where are you going to eat? What food are you going to put on the table? How can you possibly advance into the desert with just the flour? The matzah didn't even have time to rise. It was less, our matzah is less than 18 minutes when the flour comes into contact with the water. It has to come out of the oven less than 18 minutes. That's all we had. We had the dough rising on our backs. But we went forward. We knew that failure was simply not an option. You call it emunah, you call it betachan, 2 Hebrew words we're going to discuss tonight. Whatever it is, we knew that we had to go on. We knew that we are finite and limited. There is an invisible God out there. And that God, He is the one and the only one who can bring us freedom, who can bring us security, who can bring us purpose. And with that tonight, I want to begin with the story of a great man, Viktor Frankl. Now, what people don't know, everyone knows the famous Viktor Frankl. After all, his book, Man's Search for Meaning, has been translated into 28 languages. 10 million copies have been sold. But what people don't know is that in 1960, he was ridiculed. He lived in Vienna. His teacher was Sigmund Freud. And he had decided to believe and to espouse a different philosophy than his teacher, Sigmund Freud. And he was ridiculed. He was laughed at. And although he had survived Auschwitz, the scorn of his peers, the ridicule had really hurt him terribly. And he had actually applied to go live in Australia and to run away and to start a fresh new beginning. And there was a lady who came to him, and she was dispatched by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the Rebbe told this lady to go and tell Viktor Frankl, do not give up, do not despair, because your teachings will become accepted, and not only accepted, they will become renowned. He listened. And although he wasn't a religious man, he supported the Chabad of Vienna. And he stuck to it. And if you look in his noteworthy book, his world-renowned book, which changed the philosophy and the thinking of the 1960s. He writes on page 66 that if his teacher, Sigmund Freud, would have gone through, would have endured the torment and persecution that he went through, he wouldn't have believed in the principles he laid out. You see, there is an argument between Sigmund Freud and between Viktor Frankl. What is the core of a person? Is the person, as Sigmund Freud believes, pleasure-driven? That is the most important feature of the person? Impulsive and totally unconscious to the animalistic tendencies that we have within us. The id, as Freud calls it. Or is the person, as Sigmund Freud maintained, the core of the person is a person's search for meaning. And on page 66, Viktor Frankl writes, if Freud would have lived through the Holocaust, he would have changed his mind totally. And this is a quote. Freud would have changed his position beyond the basic natural drives and instincts of people. He would have encountered the human capacity of self-transcendence. We who lived in concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything, absolutely everything, can be taken from a man but one thing: the last of the human freedoms to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstance, to choose one's own way. This, maintains Viktor Frankl, is the essence of the individual. This is who we are. We are essentially a spiritual being. We are searching for meaning. We are not just an id. Dig a little deeper. We are a yid. Y-I-D. And the Rebbe writes in a letter, if you go into a city and you see the beautiful trees blossoming, you see the beauty of nature, it's amazing. People are spellbound by the miracle of creation. And you start digging, you see dirt. There's nothing there. But the problem with Sigmund Freud was he stopped digging. He only saw dirt. If he would have dug deeper, if he would have revealed the essence of what is truly there, he wouldn't just see a dirt, a pile of dirt. He would have seen diamonds. He would have seen minerals. That is the problem, that Sigmund Freud did not dig deep enough. To look at man and to dig superficially, you see base impulses. You see animalistic impulse, but you don't see the soul. And it is the soul which defines us. And that is why the Rebbe maintained that Viktor Frankl's observations are so true. When Viktor Frankl walked out of his bunker in which he was imprisoned in Auschwitz, and he saw the splendor of the sun rising and the sun setting, he saw there was something deeper, more meaningful, more beautiful, more encapsulating. And that is the splendor of creation. That is digging deeper. That is going beyond the dirt underneath the tree. It is digging deeper and uncovering the precious reservoir, the soul, the minerals, the gold, the gems which are hidden deep down. And so too, my friends, it is up to us to dig deeper. It is up to us to understand that we are not limited by what we simply see. Of course, we want things to be revealed good. As the Rabbi would say, B'tov ha'nira v'ha'nigla. You should be able to see, perceive goodness. But when the lens you use is an animalistic one, a base one, you can only see so much, when in reality, it is so, so deeper. So in Hebrew, there's a word called emunah. Emunah means faith. You don't see it now, but you have faith that you know that God is the essence of good, and you know that things have to be good, and therefore you believe, even though you don't understand it. A higher level of trust is that of bitachon. When a person has bitachon, this Hebrew word for faith, this is a level where you're convinced there is no room for any questioning. It has to be good. It is good. And it's not like you have the possibility that it could be anything else. You know, the Rebbe gives an example. When the two spies, not the original 12 spies, but the two spies who Moshe sent, dispatched into Israel, Kalev and Yeshua, Caleb and Joshua, when they went into Israel and they had refuge by Rachav, the innkeeper, she told them, I want to be safe. And they made an agreement that she would place a red string outside her building, and the conquering Hebrews would spare her building, her home. And the word which is used in conjunction with that agreement is tikva, hope. We hope that the red string will stay intact. We hope that nothing will happen. Bitachon is much, much deeper. Bitachon means there is no way it could be anything else. And, you know, I want to share with you. There was a rabbi, and he was a great rabbi, and he didn't have an easy life. His name was Rabbi Akiva. In the Talmud, it's many, many times it mentions this Rabbi Akiva. He was 40 years old when he began his journey in Judaic studies. He began to look deeper, began to understand who essentially he is, what his soul is all about. And he was actually married 3 times. And when he started at the age of 40, he went with his little son from the first marriage, and he went to yeshiva, to the academy to study. And he, with his little son, began to learn the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet. His father was a convert. His father was a descendant of Sisro. And this Rabbi Akiva, in his humility, his wife came from a very prominent, wealthy family, Kalba Sua, and his wife's father actually disowned Rachel. That was her name, because she had taken an ignoramus, a peasant, as a husband called Akiva. They had lost all of their possessions. And there he was, 40 years old, studying the Hebrew alphabet. He kept on learning and persevering. And he became the great Rabbi Akiva, the person who literally saved Judaism. Let me explain. He had 24,000 students, and they perished. The period after Passover, Pesach to Shavuos, those 49 days, we don't get married except for the 33rd day, which is called Lag BaOmer. That is the day when the students stopped dying. Rabbi Akiva's 24,000 students. Rabbi Akiva didn't give up. Rabbi Akiva, he could have easily have said, this is just too painful, this is too difficult. Rabbi Akiva took 5 students. These 5 students, under the shadow of Roman occupation and persecution, these 5 rabbis rebuilt the Jewish people. And these 5 rabbis, they went to Yehuda ben Bava, a great rabbi. They risked their lives. And the Romans, they were horribly cruel. And they said, if this rabbi, he was the only rabbi, Yehuda ben Bava, who could give smicha, there was an unbroken lineage of Moses, of Moshe putting his hands, that's what smicha means, on top of the head of Joshua, who in turn put his hands on the head of his students, and this was an unbroken chain. And these 5 students risked their life to go to Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, it says in Masechta Avodah Zarah, and there he didn't want to give them smicha in a city, because if he did, the Romans had warned and threatened that they will decimate the city. So he went in between 2 mountains, which they couldn't touch. And lo and behold, he gave them smicha. And the Romans came, and he was old, and he said, you run away, you 5 rabbis, and I will stay. The Romans murdered him without any mercy whatsoever. And he stayed to bear the brunt of their blows. These 5 students, Rabbi Akiva's life was one of hope. Rabbi Akiva's life was one of pushing forward. Even if we don't know what is going to happen, Rabbi Akiva had an upbeat, positive attitude under the worst, most horrendous times in our history. And a story in Masechta Brachos, in the Tractate of Brachos, is the one time Rabbi Akiva was traveling, and he took with him a candle, a donkey, and a rooster. The donkey he rode on, the rooster was there to wake him up in the morning, and the candle was to study Torah by the light, by the flame of a candle. And he goes, it's getting dark, he goes to a city, and he says, please let me in. Let me sleep in your city. And they say, no, we don't want you. He has no choice. He has to go out into the field, and he has to sleep in a field, not within the security of a village. Rabbi Akiva says, whatever God does, it's all for the good. I don't understand it, but it's all for the good. And as he's sitting down in the field, he has to sleep without the security and the comfort of a bed. He's studying Torah by the light of the candle, and a wind comes and blows it out. Rabbi Akiva says, everything God does is for the good. And then a fox comes and eats his rooster. The rooster was going to wake him up so he could continue to study. The crack of a hen, the crow of a hen. The rooster's gone. Rabbi Akiva says, everything that God does is for the good. And then a lion comes, and a lion eats his donkey, his form of transport. Rabbi Akiva says, whatever happens, whatever God does, it's all for the good. And he goes to sleep without his donkey, without his candle, and without his rooster. It's Rabbi Akiva alone in a field. When he wakes up in the morning, he goes past the city that refused to accommodate him. And he sees that bandits had broken in the middle of the night and decimated and killed the city. Only then did Rabbi Akiva understand that everything God does is for the good. Although we don't understand, although, as we explained in previous classes, if I would understand God, I would be God. But you know what? I know that we have a good God. I don't know exactly what the future entails. But you know something? I know that God is with us. I have emunah, I have faith that it will be good. And therefore, although now it's difficult, it's painful, I keep on going because everything God does is for the good. If the bandits would have seen Rabbi Akiva's candle, they would have come and killed him. If Rabbi Akiva would have been in the city, he would have been killed. If they would have heard the cry of his rooster, he would have been discovered and killed. If the donkey would have brayed, he also would have been slaughtered. Now Rabbi Akiva understands. Everything that God does, he understood clearly is for the good. And that's why Rabbi Akiva, with his temperament, with his understanding, was able to recreate the Jewish people through his 5 students. Although 24, what a colossal 24,000 students perished, it was Rabbi Akiva, with his understanding, with his clear vision, was able and determined to rebuild the Jewish people. The famous story in the end of Masechta Makos, it speaks about how right after the destruction of the temple, Rabbi Akiva is walking at the Temple Mount with other rabbis. And the other rabbis, they start crying. And Rabbi Akiva starts laughing. What happened? They saw a fox running through the Holy of Holies, the ruin, the waste, the broken and plundered temple. And there, running through the bricks, is this fox. And they asked Rabbi Akiva, why are you laughing? He says, why are you crying? He said, Rabbi Akiva, of course we're crying. Here we have the Holy of Holies. Here we have the most sublime, the most elevated, the most lofty place in the world that even the high priest wasn't allowed to go in there. Only once a year. And you know what? A fox is running through the rubble of the Holy of Holies? Of course we're crying. What do you expect? And Rabbi Akiva understands why they're crying. And they turn to Rabbi Akiva and they say, Rabbi Akiva, why? You didn't answer our question. Our answer makes sense. You don't make sense. Why are you laughing? How can you laugh when that happens? When a fox runs through the rubble and the ruin of our most majestic place, the Holy of Holies. And Rabbi Akiva says, I'll tell you why I'm laughing. I'm laughing because we know there's an ancient tradition that one day, we never thought this would happen, the temple would be destroyed. The second temple is lying in ruins. No one thought the day would come when the second temple would be destroyed, the majestic, beautiful second temple. How could it lay in ruins? No one thought it would ever happen. And just like no one thought that that would ever transpire, how could anyone think that the rebuilding of the third temple will ever happen? So just like one prophecy came to be, so too the third prophecy, the one day the third temple, which we have spoken about, that will be rebuilt and the Jewish people will be returned to Jerusalem. Just like the destruction happens, so too the third temple and the ultimate temple will also endure and will also happen. So the Rebbe explains, this isn't just a story. This is a perspective of life. Rabbi Akiva, even though now he's going through difficulty, even though now his donkey, his candle, his rooster have gone. He's all alone in a field. But Rabbi Akiva understands that although the temple lies in ruin, although a majestic Beis HaMikdash has been transformed into rubble, but you know what? I see the future, that the third temple will come. So I am experiencing the third temple as I stand here right now, seeing the fox run through the ruin of the second temple's destruction. The Rebbe explains that halachically, according to Jewish law, this is a different perception, and this affects the way we act now. Let me give you an example. When you have two conflicting halachic Jewish laws, for example, it says you should do a circumcision early in the morning. Zrizim makdim mitzvahs. Those who take Judaism seriously, they should wake up early in the morning and they should do the mitzvah as early as you can. You can't do the mitzvah of circumcision when it's dark, but as soon as it gets light, you should do it. But then what do you do if you have a conflicting need? And that is, that it says, B'roivam hadras melech, that the glory of the king is with a multitude of people. If you do it 7 o'clock in the morning as the crack of dawn, you'll do it early in the morning, but you won't have a lot of people. It's too early. So the Rebbe explains, it depends. Is your Weltanschauung, is your perception of the world the same as Rabbi Akiva? Or is it according to the rabbis? According to the rabbis, right now, 7 o'clock in the morning, that's what matters. Rabbi Akiva says no. Even though it's 7 o'clock in the morning and I can do the circumcision, but the future of B'roi V'am Hadras Melech, the future, the reality that there will be a lot of people, that influences now, and therefore we should wait till later to have the circumcision. But if you go according to the rabbis, you have to do what you have to do at 7 o'clock in the morning. You can do the circumcision. You got to do it now. So the Rebbe takes this story in the Talmud and he translates it into practical application, into how are we supposed to act in our daily life. Now, my friends, let me tell you something. The Tachan, this higher level, where there is no way out, it must be good. This is a trait which we believe is necessary. Just as the Jews, they marched out into the desert with only flour. How are you going to feed millions of people in a desert? But they knew without any uncertainty that they would be okay. They knew it would be okay. So we are told in Hasidic literature, Hasidic teachings, there is a concept of trach gut, vet sein gut. When you think good, when you create a reality in thought, a positivity, it has to be good. Then you know what happens? From thought, it trickles down into the world of reality, of action, and it happens to be good. There is a landmark, a famous sikha, a teaching of the Rebbe. The Rebbe explains that Moses was scared after he had slayed the bully Egyptian who was victimizing a poor Hebrew for no reason, trying to kill this poor Hebrew. Moshe was scared because he killed him. And the Rebbe explains the fact that Moshe was scared, that's what caused Pharaoh to chase him out of Egypt, that he had to go to Midian. When you think good, it'll be okay. Don't worry about what happens. Just keep on going. Your world is a world of goodness. Your world is a pleasant world. When you think good, that thought creates a reality in the world of thought, and then it becomes that way in the world of action. This, my friends, this is what we're told. There's the famous story of the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitch Rebbe, and a student, a chassid, had come visit him because his son was dying. And the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe, said, Trach gut wird sein gut. Think good, and it will be good. You know what? The moment he started thinking good, that's when everything changed. In Melbourne, Australia, there was a horrible string of bad occurrences. The last people had tragically passed away, and the last event was a new rabbi who had come, a great man, Rabbi Winner, Yankee Winner, had come to be the mashpia in the yeshiva, in the school in Melbourne, Australia. And Friday night, he's run over by a car. Terrible. And Rabbi Groner, the head Chabad rabbi in Melbourne, Australia, he wrote into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, there's a tzivui, there is a commandment of think good and it will be good. When you know there's a commandment, there's no two ways about it. You got to do it. When we think good, when we create, not just we feel good that it's going to be good, you have to command yourself. You have to take control of your thought process. You have to realize, like Viktor Frankl says, that we are at our core good. We are kind. We are prepared to go beyond the letter of the law. When we do this, and when we establish within the recesses of our hearts and our intellect that it is good, and we act as if it's good, that trickles down into the world of reality. And I'll tell you something, if you study business people, the ones I know, they're all optimistic people. The ones I know, they have this can-do attitude. Now, of course, that doesn't mean you should be blind and oblivious to certain fears and trepidation. You know, you have to take certain things into account. The desert, after all, is scorching. But when a person, notwithstanding all the other factors, in their brain, they understand they have betachan and they know and they're convinced that it's going to be good, it ends up good. The people who in the Holocaust, my dad was one of them. He told me he knew he was going to come home. He knew he was going to survive. Mari Ebner, another Holocaust survivor. Same thing, Sam Boymel, another Holocaust survivor. They all had in their mind a picture, a knowledge, an understanding that it will be good, that they will come home, that they will survive. They have to survive because failure is not an option. When you think like that, and when you live like that, then you can go on to do anything. Because you understand that God is a merciful God, that God is with you. And although I'm not saying it's easy, and although we see the economy horribly melting down, and I see with my eyes pain and anguish and trepidation, but when we know and when we believe that it has to be good, that there is no alternative, and we truly take upon ourselves and we go into the recesses of our heart, just like our ancestors did, as they marched into the scorching desert. They knew that there was a God. And this is not that it's unbased. You know, there's in the Talmud, there's a story in Masechta Tainis of Chanina, the son of Doisa. And he comes home Friday night, just before the Sabbath, and his daughter's weeping, she's crying. And he asks her, why are you so upset? And she says, let me tell you why. Let me tell you why. I want to light Shabbos candles. And all I have is vinegar. We're so poor. I don't have oil. Chanina ben Doisa told her, the same God that made oil burn, he will make the vinegar burn. What are you scared of? Just take the vinegar and use it. And so it was. You see, my friends, the world in which we live, there is a reality. It's nature. But guess what? God created the nature. God isn't limited by the nature. If there's a way you could pick yourself up, connect to something higher, you don't fall down. The famous story of Rabbi of Premishlan. In 1990, I went to the city of Premishlan. It's very hilly. I saw the broken tomb of Rabbi of Premishlan, his grave. And as I climbed up somewhat of a hill, I remembered the famous story. The story that there were two young boys, and these two young boys, they had climbed up this hill, and they fell down, and they were in horrible critical care. And Reb Meir of Premishlan was going to go up to the mikveh on the top of the hill, and they told him, don't do it, because these two 18-year-old boys, they fell and hurt themselves. How can you possibly go up the hill? And he said, I'm going. He marched up the hill, went to the mikveh, came back down. They said, Rebbe, you did a miracle. He said, it's not a miracle. So when you're connected to something higher, you don't fall down. Each and every one of us, we're not just standing here on our own. We are connected to a God. We are connected to a reality that breathes life into us, that controls the universe, the world which he created. You know, vinegar is not supposed to burn, but either is oil for that matter. God creates the property of what burns and what doesn't. It says, there's a Talmud, Masechta Brachos, it says that a Jew plants a seed, actually, Masechta Shabbos, it says that a Jew plants a seed and he prays that it's going to grow. The Rebbe asked, why does it say, you plant the seed, it grows? Hey, seeds grow. What do you have to pray it's going to grow? The Rebbe explains, nothing has to happen. The fact that the sun rose in the west and set in the east, and it's done it for over 5,000 years. That's the way it goes. Doesn't mean it has to happen tomorrow. Just because people wake up every morning doesn't mean that, God forbid, we don't wake up. We have to wake up tomorrow. Every moment, God creates the reality, the world in which we live. We pray that the seed will grow because it doesn't have to grow. The only reason the seed grows is because God makes it grow. When we understand that the world in which we live, is God's will, nature doesn't exist independent of God. Everything in this world is a result of God's desire. When we understand that, we don't have to be so scared of the world. We have to create a vessel, a receptacle for blessings to come. My friends, we need betachin. We have to know, we have to trust, we have to yearn, we have to hope and pray that God is with us, that we're connected to something higher. That doesn't mean it's easy. It means that we are a spiritual people, that at our essence is not id, but yid, a soul, a reservoir of hope, treasures. That is who and what we are. Likutei Sichos, Chelik Yud Daled, page 101. The Rebbe writes that the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad rabbi, in his Shulchan Aruch, not in the Siddur, he says that it's good for us every day to read the Torah portion about the Mon. Now, before we say anything, I want to tell you what Maimonides says about the manna which fell from heaven. Do you know, Maimonides says, that the end of the 40 years, people woke up and they thought, hey, manna, it happens. It's nature. You know, you wake up in the morning and there's manna. People took it for granted because the word nature, teva, also means Tubu b'yam, to sink, to drown. Why? Because nature is in fact, God is hidden in nature. When something sinks, when something drowns in the water, it's there, but you don't see it. Our reality, our mission, our job is to reveal God. That is our purpose. That's why we're here. Oil burns, but if God wants vinegar to burn, it can burn also. Yeah, things are difficult. Yes, there is pain. Yes, the world we know it after the coronavirus has changed, has altered. But guess what? There's a God who controls the world, and there's a God who controls every moment of our existence. So why we, the Jewish people, should be limited by thinking that we're doomed when our very existence is a miracle? The fact that we're alive, the tiny persecuted Jewish people, after thousands of years of destruction, the mighty Romans who we were talking about with Rabbi Akiva, they are gone. It is not the same Rome as ancient old Romans. They're a different people. My friends, we the Jews are a walking miracle. That's who we are. Every Jew in the world today is a walking miracle. When we realize that our reality, who and what we are, is not based on nature, it's not based on statistics. Our existence, our breath of life, is a living miracle. And the man is an example of this. Because you see, when the Jews had faith, there were three levels of receiving the man. The righteous got it right by their bed, right outside their tent. There was the intermediate who got it, and they had to prepare it somewhat. And then there were the people who didn't have faith. They had to travel far, and they had to take it, and they had to grind it. But when you had faith, guess what happens? When you had faith, the man was right there for you. It was unlimited. You could think of any taste you wanted, and that's the way it was. Not only was the taste unlimited, but additionally, it came with diamonds, it came with blessings. The Alter Rebbe is telling us that we need to read the chapter of the man because we have to understand and we have to appreciate that when we show that the blessings we have, the manna from heaven that we receive, they are because of God's kindness and his bountiful blessing. When we appreciate, when we understand this, and we experience the world in not a way which is limited by nature, by concealment, but rather our essence is to do more. Our essence is to break beyond the veil that covers the world. When we understand this, when we appreciate this, we can break out of our limitations. We can break out of Egypt. We can become greater. We don't have to experience fear. Pain is real, but fear is imaginary. Pain is real. When someone feels pain, you can't come up and say, no, you don't feel pain. You feel pain, it hurts. But fear is all the mind. It's an anxiety which doesn't have to exist. You can go out into the desert. You can march out with a sense of pride and identity and knowledge that you will be okay. It's the manna. It's the way you experience things. It's the way you understand things. You don't have to be intimidated by the world. Yes, sadly, painfully, we don't want a world where there's a meltdown, where the world doesn't function the way we're used to, where there's uncertainty. We don't want anyone to suffer. But in our minds, when we march, when we leap, when we plunge forward, we have within the recesses of our soul, not animalistic id, but the yid, the essence of who we are. We have the ability to overcome. And we must overcome because our thoughts create the reality that God responds to. When we think good, there's a concept called midah keneged midah. If you look at Masechta Sota in the tractate of Sota, it speaks about, in the Mishnah, how the way we respond to the world, that's the way the world becomes to us. And there are many, many examples of this. When we act happy, we break out of our confinement. We break out of our problems. When we act happy, God corresponds in the same way. He's happy. What do you want from him? The guy's happy. He's full of joy. He has something to be excited about. When we create happiness in our minds, when we realize that all we are is a broken piece, a broken matzah, everything we have is not us. There's something greater than us. You know something, my friends? Mizmor L'Seidah in the 100th chapter of Tehillim of Psalms, it says, V'loi anachnu. Now, this is Hebrew, but let me explain. The word loy, it can be written with an aleph, and it can be written with a vav. What's the difference? The word loy, it sounds the same. Let me tell you the difference. The loy with an aleph means no. Loy, can, yes. Loy, no. The word loy with a vav means to him. My friends, the more the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe said, there's a Kriya and there's a Ksiv. The more we forget about ourselves, the loy with an aleph, the more we understand that it's not about me, but I'm broken. I'm not whole. I need God. I need my fellow Jew. I need my brother. I need my sister. I don't live as an island to myself. I'm broken. That's what we do at the Pesach. We break the matzah. The more we realize, the more we appreciate the loy with an aleph, forget about yourself. Forget about your ego. Forget about your impulses that Sigmund Freud was so caught up in. Why don't you worry about something higher and greater? Why don't I worry about the other person's pain? Why don't I worry about an imperfect world where people have to suffer? The more loy with an aleph, the more no, we say no to the animalistic tendencies that we have within ourselves. Then you know what happens? Then the loy with a vav, then we belong, then we have a sense of purpose, then nothing, absolutely nothing can stop us. And we can march out into the desert with only a little bit of dough. But you know what? We march out with the certainty and the knowledge and the understanding that we will prevail. My friends, Wednesday night, after approximately 8:30 at night when it's dark, you have to eat the shmur matzah. We, Chabad of Columbus, any Jew who wants shmur matzah, the special protected matzah from the time it is cut, that it has not come into any contact with the liquid, we will give matzah. There's a lot of Jews in Columbus. Let me tell you something. Any Jew that comes to us and says, we want this matzah, we will give it to you. When it comes to Seder's to go, because now we are, for the first time, we are limited. We're in confinement, as we explained before, that the Jews in Egypt, they also had solitary confinement, that they were trapped in their homes and they couldn't go out till the morning. We are alone physically, but we are not alone mentally. We are not just a base animal with tendencies, with impulses, with animalistic needs. We are a soul. And my friends, when we eat the matzah, we, like our ancestors, it's in our DNA. We know that the world we see it is broken. It's not the way it's supposed to be. But guess what? We're not alone. Hashem, God is with us. We will survive. We won't just survive, we'll flourish. And even though the temple is in a state of disrepair, it's rubble, it's reduced to rubble, the majestic temple. But Rabbi Akiva's laughing because he sees the future He knows that it will be rebuilt. We know that we will. We have to. Failure is not an option. We will outlive this terrible, terrible time. We will beat the coronavirus. We must, my friends, have the strength, connect to something higher like Rabbi of Primazlan. Eat the matzah Wednesday night after 8:30 when it gets dark. Rejoice and feel that, yes, we are alive. We are here to flourish. We are here to blossom and to go into any desert of uncertainty. We are here and we will overcome, and not just overcome, we will flourish. Because trach gut wird sein gut. When you think good, it becomes good, and no one should worry, because we will overcome and flourish and prosper. And Passover is our beginning, and beginning to only blessings in a revealed state of health and happiness and family.